What's going on, everybody? My name is Brent, and welcome to another video from Work in Progress, the very first episode of a look back, this series where I look back at some of my favorite games that I've played throughout my 34 years on this planet. And I thought that to kick things off with Spider-Man releasing either today or tomorrow, depending on when this video is released. If this video is released on Thursday, it is tomorrow. If this video is released on Friday, it is today. I thought it was a good time to talk about a couple of my favorite games towards the end of the PlayStation 4 generation, Spider-Man and Spider-Man Miles Morales. So let's kind of talk about this. Spider-Man was first announced back at E3 in 2016, I believe, with this very sort of brief teaser featuring Yuri Lowenthal voicing Spider-Man as he's kind of swinging through cities. And it wasn't really much of swinging. It was more just a cinematic with a little bit of swinging in there. And it just kind of set things off in a way that, like, I was like, oh my gosh, here we go, getting another Spider-Man game. And, you know, over the years, Spider-Man games have sort of been hit and miss ever since Spider-Man 2, the movie tie-in game back in 2004, which was huge because it actually got web swinging right. Some of the best web swinging up until Marvel Spider-Man by Insomniac. And that always is what made people hesitant, or at least me hesitant. I don't want to speak for everybody, but at least me hesitant about a Spider-Man game because I loved the web swinging in Spider-Man 2 back in 2004, and no other game since really captured it. So I was skeptical, but still excited back in 2016. Then in 2017, we get our first like real true look at the game itself, where you see Spider-Man going through the Fisk tower to save the men there from the inner demons. And then you do the wrecking ball scene and you're swinging through the city, and we get our first look at the swinging, and the swinging is so sick. And they cut some things out to avoid spoilers, or they changed some things up to avoid spoilers, and it looked fantastic. So that was 2017. That was E3 2017. And then E3 2018, the year that the game was set to launch, we get another scene. We get the raft breakout scene where Spider-Man's trying to wrangle in Electro. And then he's met with the Sinister Six, which is revealed to consist of everybody, including Martin Lee. I don't know, was Martin Lee in that presentation? Whatever, but it still featured Electro, Vulture, Rhino, Scorpion, just like the Sinister Six squad. And then of course it cuts to black just as like the leader, and of course that led everyone to speculate who would be the leader of it was. And if you're familiar with Spider-Man the way that I am, we all knew that it was going to be Dr. Octopus. So finally the game comes out a few months later, and boy, like I got the Spider-Man PS4 Pro special edition thing, which was really cool. And once again, it was a game that I just could not put down, and I couldn't stop playing it. It was such a fantastic game. It had great characters, great voice acting. You got Yuri Lowenthal as Peter Parker Spider-Man, Laura Bailey as MJ, and a whole other mess of actors that just nailed it in that game. One of the things that I really liked about it was the fact that, and this is something that Insomniac really liked too, is telling stories where Spider-Man's world affects Peter Parker and vice versa. So you've got Otto Octavius, who is Peter's mentor throughout the game, slowly turning into Dr. Octopus, and that affecting Peter's relationship with him. And then, in the third act of the game, he's full on Dr. Octopus, and Spider-Man has to take him down. And not only that, Otto is responsible for releasing a deadly biological weapon across New York City, which is starting to kill people. And then, of course, you've got Martin Lee as Mr. Negative, and he employs Aunt May And once Peter realizes that Martin Lee is the cause of a lot of the problems as Mr. Negative, he starts worrying about Aunt May and her status at Feast. Then we're also introduced to Miles Morales, who is also affected by Martin Lee when Martin Lee kills his father. And I just thought all of those great things coming together were really fantastic. And then, of course, like, you got the Sinister Six. I know I'm gushing about the Sinister Six. It's really hard. It's been really hard for Spider-Man, especially in the live action movies, to really establish a good Sinister Six. And I like how Insomniac was, hey, you know what? This Peter Parker he's a veteran now. He's 8 years into his tenure as Spider-Man. He's taken down a bunch of these villains. Let's go ahead and just throw them all back at him. I love that. I love the fact that you get to fight. You get to have an aerial fight with Electro and Vulture, which was intense. And then a ground fight with Scorpion and Rhino. Scorpion, I always found Scorpion to be a bit of a pain just because he leaps everywhere. And then Rhino hits like a truck. Anyways, so it was fantastic. And then, of course, emotional fights with Martin Lee and Dr. Octopus, where Dr. Octopus realizes that, or reveals that he has known that Peter Parker was Spider-Man the whole time, and it creates this really amazing emotional scene at the end, and it was just perfect. Some other things that I really liked about the game were the fact that the collectibles felt really good in the sense that they had a purpose, right? So Peter Parker's backpacks, like every time you picked up a new backpack, he would narrate about what the item within the backpack meant. You know, sometimes it was a little piece from an old villain where he'd talk about taking down that villain, or his history with MJ, or his childhood growing up. But it was really cool because although the game itself isn't an origin story, you are given pieces of his origin story that feel organic and in place. So that way we get an idea of what's going on in this particular Spider-Man's universe. The whole game is fantastic, and I'm not talking about everything here. If you haven't played it, you know, it's been 5 years. You should go play it. You should check it out. But there's a lot that I'm leaving out. And, you know, I want to move on to the DLC, the City That Never Sleeps DLC, which was released only a few months after the game was launched. And it was one piece of DLC every month. And, you know, the first DLC was the heist, where you're introduced to Black Cat, and you do some missions with her. You get a little bit of backstory on her. And, you know, there's some really weird, awkward moments between Peter and MJ revolving around relationships that they had during their hiatus as a couple. There's really cool, like, collectibles. You're collecting these pieces of art that tie into Black Cat's backstory. And then at the end of that, you're left at a cliffhanger with Hammerhead. And then the second part of the DLC is Turf Wars, where you're really introduced to Hammerhead as a villain. And that one was a lot of fun. That one, it was fun, but I preferred Silver, like it was kind of like this weird middle part. And you are okay. The best part about this DLC was Yuri's story as the police captain and what she's going through because Hammerhead is killing her men. And that was really cool. And at the end of this DLC, you know, she does some pretty sketchy stuff and she's basically dismissed. And that kind of bleeds over into Silver Lining, where Silver Sable comes back. I didn't talk about her. She was part of the main game. She helped support Norman Osborn during the Devil's Breath crisis. And she comes back to help kind of clean things up and get her weapons out of the hands of Hammerhead. And one of my favorite bits about this was some of the collectibles, where you kind of learn about all these different crimes that went sort of unsolved and It was just kind of all sketchy, and it kind of leads into some stuff that is going to happen with Yuri, which I expect to be tied up in Spider-Man 2. Then moving on to Miles Morales, that was actually a bit of a surprise. That game was announced just before the PS5 launched, and it was going to be a PlayStation 5 launch title, although it was also available on the PS4. And it's a mini experience focused on Miles. It is a smaller game that takes maybe 20 hours to do everything in it, even the platinum. I've platinumed both games, by the way. I've 100%ed Spider-Man, I've 100%ed the DLC, and I've 100%ed Spider-Man Miles Morales. And that was a really great story that really showed Miles Morales. Now, I'm a Peter Parker guy. I grew up with Peter. He is my preferred Spider-Man. But I really like this version of Miles Morales and what they're doing with that character. And I'm super excited to see where this character leads, even though I'm sure that he's going to eventually completely replace Peter Parker in the future. So we'll have to see what happens. There's still more games to be made. And, you know, he's dealing with being a teenager and being Spider-Man, keeping his identity a secret. You're introduced to the villain Tinkerer, who turns out to be his best friend. And that turns into this thing. And it was just a really great game. And it showed what Spider-Man games can be like on the PS5. The game was so smooth and it felt so good that, like, playing Spider-Man and playing Miles Morales, it's like night and day. And it's obvious that, like, even just between those two games, they evolved in a way that just, like, that everything just became better. And I can only imagine what's going to happen with Spider-Man 2. In any case, well, that about wraps it up with this video. I really loved these games, and I'm going to always return to them. I know that there's always this debate about whether or not Sony's games are replayable. I replay them all the time. I've replayed Spider-Man like 8 times, so I absolutely love these games. I'm sure that I'm a bit biased too, because Spider-Man's my favorite superhero. Surprise. Anyways, so that about does it. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing, and we will see you on the next looking back video. And yeah, enjoy Spider-Man, enjoy Spider-Man Miles Morales, and I'm looking forward to Spider-Man 2. All right, everyone, we'll see you on the next one.